Imagine a country where getting a government job is like winning the lottery. Now, imagine that a big chunk of those winning tickets are already reserved for a specific group of people. That's the basic idea behind Bangladesh's quota system. It's a policy designed to help certain disadvantaged groups, for example, the families of veterans who fought for the country's independence against Pakistan. Sounds fair enough, right? Well, it's a lot more complicated than that. The problem is, this system has been around for decades, even for the freedom fighters' descendants, and many people feel like it's out of touch with the realities of today's Bangladesh. They argue that it creates an uneven playing field, where meritocracy takes a backseat to historical privileges. Around 30% of the quota is reserved for the veterans, and the other 16% is reserved for women and physically or mentally disabled groups, which left only 44% for general public. This has led to deep resentment, particularly among young people who feel like their dreams are being held hostage by a system that seems rigged against them. To truly understand the anger and frustration fueling the protests, we need to rewind the clock a bit and delve into the roots of this contentious issue. Bangladesh's quota system isn't some newfangled idea. It's been a part of the country's fabric since its birth in 1971, following its hard-fought independence. Following a bloody war of independence, the newly formed nation wanted to honor the sacrifices made by its freedom fighters, who had laid down their lives for the country's freedom. So they implemented a system that reserved a significant portion of government jobs for veterans and their families, ensuring they were rewarded for their immense contributions. On the surface, this seemed like a noble gesture, a way to ensure that those who had given so much would be taken care of, and their sacrifices would not be forgotten. However, as time went on, the cracks in this system began to show, revealing deeper issues within the framework, as their descendants were also being benefited. Critics argued that it created a culture of dependency and entitlement, while simultaneously shutting out talented individuals from other backgrounds, leading to widespread discontent. The quota system, initially intended as a temporary measure, had morphed into a seemingly permanent fixture, and with each passing generation the resentment grew, fueling ongoing protests and debates about its relevance in modern Bangladesh. Pause 3S. As the cracks in the quota system deepened, a new wave of frustration began to swell among the youth of Bangladesh. University students, who felt the brunt of this system more acutely than most, began to organize and mobilize. The tipping point came in early 2018, but now in 2024, when thousands of students from various universities across the country took to the streets in a series of massive protests. Pause 2S. These young men and women, armed with nothing more than placards and chants, demanded a fairer and more just system that would allow them to compete on an even playing field. Their voices echoed through the streets of Dhaka and beyond, capturing the nation's attention and igniting a broader movement for change. Pause 2S. The protests were marked by a sense of urgency and determination, as students clashed with police in a bid to make their voices heard. Social media played a crucial role in amplifying their message, as images and videos of the protests went viral, drawing international attention to their cause. Pause 2S. The government, caught off guard by the scale and intensity of the demonstrations, initially responded with a heavy hand, deploying riot police and using tear gas to disperse the crowds. But the students remained undeterred, their resolve only strengthened by the adversity they faced. Pause 2S. This groundswell of dissent set the stage for the Supreme Court's intervention, as the nation's highest judicial authority was forced to confront the deep-seated issues that had been festering for decades. The students' unwavering commitment to their cause would prove to be a pivotal moment in the ongoing struggle for justice and equality in Bangladesh. Pause 3S. As the student protests gained momentum, social media emerged as a powerful catalyst for their cause. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram were flooded with posts, tweets, and live streams that documented the unfolding events in real time. Pause 2S. The digital realm became a battleground where students could share their stories, rally support, and coordinate their efforts. Hashtags like #ReformQuotaSystem and #JusticeForStudents began to trend, drawing the attention of not only local citizens, but also the global community. Pause 2S. Social media allowed the students to bypass traditional media channels, which were often controlled or influenced by the government. This democratization of information meant that the true scale and nature of the protests could not be easily suppressed or misrepresented. Pause 2S. Viral videos showing peaceful demonstrations being met with police brutality sparked outrage and solidarity from people all over the world. International human rights organizations and influential figures began to voice their support for the students, putting additional pressure on the Bangladeshi government to address their demands. Pause 2S. The online support translated into tangible actions as well. Crowdfunding campaigns were launched to provide resources for the protesters, and virtual forums were set up to discuss strategies and share legal advice. The digital age had given the students a new arsenal of tools to fight for their rights, and they wielded them with remarkable effectiveness. Pause 2S. This unprecedented use of social media in the protests not only amplified the students' voices, but also signaled a shift in the way social movements could be organized and sustained in the 21st century. The stage was now set for the Supreme Court's intervention as the nation and the world watched closely. Section 6. A digital battleground. Social media fuels the protests. The 2024 protests were different from their 2018 predecessors in one crucial aspect: the prominent role of social media, which became a powerful tool for mobilization and communication.
Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram became virtual battlegrounds, where students shared their stories, organized protests, and rallied support. These platforms allowed for unprecedented levels of coordination and outreach.
The government's attempts to control the narrative and suppress dissent were met with a digital counter-offensive, as tech-savvy protesters found ways to circumvent censorship and get their message out to the world. The global reach of social media amplified their voices far beyond national borders.
The use of social media had a profound impact on the protests. It allowed for real-time updates, ensuring that everyone was on the same page. This real-time communication was crucial for the success of the protests.
It helped to galvanize international support, putting pressure on the Bangladeshi government to address the protesters' concerns. The international community's attention was a significant factor in the movement's momentum.
And perhaps most importantly, it provided a platform for voices that had long been silenced, allowing them to share their stories of frustration, anger, and hope with the world. This digital platform became a beacon of hope and a powerful tool for change.
Section 7. The world takes notice. International pressure mounts. As the protests gained momentum, they began to attract international attention. News outlets around the globe picked up the story, shining a spotlight on the plight of Bangladeshi students and the government's heavy-handed response.
Human rights organizations issued statements condemning the violence and calling for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. The international community's growing concern placed additional pressure on the Bangladeshi government. Suddenly, the country's internal affairs were being debated on a global stage.
This scrutiny, while unwelcome by those in power, proved to be a double-edged sword. It amplified the protesters' voices and gave them a sense of validation, but it also raised the stakes, making a peaceful resolution all the more urgent. Section 8. The breaking point. Escalation and the Prime Minister's resignation. Despite mounting pressure from both domestic and international quarters, the government seemed unable to quell the unrest due to serious allegations of killing over 1,000 students and also for the disruption of internet access for 8 straight days. All of these allegations turned out to be true, which enraged the students of all over Bangladesh. The protests continued to escalate, with clashes between demonstrators and law enforcement becoming increasingly violent.
The situation reached a boiling point when the students announced a new campaign known as Long March to Dhaka, when, in a dramatic turn of events, millions of students showed up and was approaching the PM's residence from around all corners of the city. The army was ordered to kill the students by tanks and fighter jets, which they didn't agree on, which concerned the PM's safety, and hence, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina announced her resignation. Hasina's resignation was seen by many as a direct consequence of her government's mishandling of the crisis.
It underscored the depth of public anger and the unsustainable nature of the status quo. Her departure, however, did little to immediately quell the unrest. Bangladesh was left grappling with a power vacuum and the daunting task of charting a new course forward. Section 9. Picking up the pieces. the aftermath, and the path forward. The resignation of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina marked the end of an era in Bangladeshi politics. It also ushered in a period of profound uncertainty.
The country was left reeling from the protests, grappling with the fallout of the violence and searching for a path towards healing and reformation. The challenges facing Bangladesh in the aftermath of the protests were immense.
The new government had to find a way to address the legitimate grievances of the protesters while also ensuring stability and continuity. It had to restore faith in the political system, bridge the deep divisions within society, and create a more equitable and just society for all citizens. Section 10. A Nation at a Crossroads: Lessons Learned and the Future of Bangladesh. The quota system unrest in Bangladesh was a stark reminder of the power of peaceful protest and the importance of listening to the voices of the people.
It exposed the fragility of social contracts, the dangers of clinging to outdated policies, and the need for responsive and accountable governance. As Bangladesh moves forward, it must learn from this chapter in its history.
The country has a unique opportunity to build a more just and equitable society, one where opportunities are based on merit, not historical privilege. It's a long and difficult road ahead, but the hope is that by addressing the root causes of the unrest, Bangladesh can emerge from this crisis stronger and more united than ever before.